back everyone. Today we are going to be doing something super fun and learning quite a bit. We're actually going to be learning about the different parts of a pumpkin. So I thought a great way to figure out the different parts is to actually cut one open and see. So I know we've already planted our pumpkin and we've been watching it grow, but today we're going to be doing something a little bit different with this pumpkin. Instead of cutting it just like you would a normal pumpkin, we're going to actually try to cut it in half. I'm not sure how well this is going to go, but we're going to do our best. So this is a sugar pumpkin or a pie pumpkin. These are actually pumpkins that you can use to actually make pumpkin pie. So I will show you the different parts you can use. But here's the outside. You can tell it's pretty tiny, fits in one hand. They're really cute. So we're going to be cutting this in half. Like I said, I'm going to do the best I can. It has a stem. You have the bottom part. So one interesting thing about this, on every pumpkin, here's another pumpkin I have. This is actually called a fairy tale pumpkin. You can see it on the bottom of this one too. Each pumpkin has this little circle, and this is actually where, when it was on the vine, what happened is there was a flower, and the flower started to grow, and then the pumpkin started as like a little tiny little circle on the end of the flower, and the flower was connected to this, and so this is where the blossom was. And then eventually what happens is that the flower dies and it falls off, but the pumpkin starts growing from that spot instead. So that is what that is for. This is, so if you've ever seen a giant pumpkin plant, which they are giant if you've never seen one, this is where the flower connects to, and that's where you can kind of see where pumpkins are going to grow if you've seen them. So we have our pumpkin. I am going to need a knife and a cutting board. Again, I'm going to do the best I can. So I have a cutting board. It's going to probably be very, very, very messy. And we have our knife, and we're going to go ahead and do our best to cut this in half. So last time when I was doing our pumpkin, we just cut out the top because I wanted to use the seeds on the inside. This time we're going to do it a little bit different, and I'm going to do my best to slice this pumpkin in half. So I'm going to hold it down, and I'm going to kind of rock back and forth just to kind of get it through. So as we're doing this, you guys will notice that the skin is very, very tough, which is very important. So this outer shell, this is the skin of the pumpkin, or the shell of the pumpkin, and it is very, very tough. And one reason is so bugs don't get into it, or any type of disease for plants. In case you didn't know, that plants can also get sick. So they're really hard shell. Just protect it from things that might want to destroy the pumpkin. So I have partway through, my stem's going to be really hard to do. So I'm going to cut through this bottom part. I'm hoping once I cut through part of it, you can see it's in half. There's some water coming out, pumpkin juice. Hopefully once we get through most of this, we'll be able to break it in half. And if you are doing this at home, please make sure a grown-up does this. You guys can see some of it inside. This is very dangerous. Another easy way you could kind of see the inside of a pumpkin would be to just smash it on the ground. Even when you are carving pumpkins, you can see the inside. I wanted to be able to really see, though, if we cut it in half, what would our pumpkin look like? It's very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to hopefully just pull it with the stem part. Oh, it's stinky. So here are two sides of the pumpkin. We're going to go ahead and look at these different parts right now and kind of see what each part is and what is its purpose in the pumpkin. Get ready. Let's go ahead and explore the parts of a pumpkin. Here's what we have. If you've ever cut open a cantaloupe or a honeydew melon, it kind of looks similar. They are pretty similar. So we talked about our outside skin of our pumpkin. That is this orange shell. It's hard, it's pretty tough. You don't want to eat this part. It would not be good to eat. It is even trying to peel it off. It's really hard. And again, that is so it protects this pumpkin while it's growing from any bugs trying to get inside of it, from any bad diseases that might harm the pumpkin. That is what it does. We have also our stem. This is the part where it's connected to the vine. So we talked about how there was a flower that grew here, and the pumpkin was the end of it. this is the part that actually connects to the vine, and this is part of the vine, and it gets cut off when the pumpkin is fully grown, when it's ready. Because if you didn't know, pumpkins don't start out orange. They actually start out green, and they change color as they get bigger. So this can depend how big or small it is. It just depends where they cut it off the vine. So you could actually have a pumpkin still growing on the vine, and you're going to notice that the stems could be really, really thin. It does change color. They usually start out green, and then it turns to brown or brown-green. This one is kind of a mixture of the brown and the green and beige almost. You need to be careful though, because sometimes this one was not one. The stems will fall off if you pick up your pumpkin. So one thing that we don't have that would be part of this, and it would be coming off the stem if it was on the vine, is called a tendril, and it's like a green and it's like a curlicue. And what that does, that actually serves a purpose. It's to keep the pumpkin in place so it doesn't move around, it doesn't get moved, so it can stay still and grow and get bigger and bigger like it's supposed to be doing. So we can't see that on pumpkins that we have already harvested, we've cut off, but that is what they do. They also usually have leaves on them, really big leaves, and those help the pumpkin by getting the sunlight, sometimes by protecting it. So those are very important as well. And we talked about before on the outside, so on our shell, the lines, these are actually called ribs, kind of like our ribs in our body. And different ones can have different types of ribbing. So our fairy tale pumpkin looks, oh my goodness, very different from our sugar pumpkin or our pie pumpkin. And you can tell this one has very smooth ridges. I can't see the ribs. This one we can see those ribs really well. It's also different color stem, but they can all be very different. So these are the ribs, and they are just something that pumpkins have. Sometimes, like I said, this one is shallow or not very deep. Our fairy tale one had very deep ribs, and they are on the outside of the pumpkin. You'll notice on the inside, we don't see those ribs. So our shell, again, you don't want to eat your shell. You can eat it, it's just not going to taste very good. So I suggest maybe don't eat that. The inside, once we get to the inside of our pumpkin, normally our handle will come off, but this one, like I said, it's real sturdy. So when I look on the inside, you guys can see if I tilt it, you can see some moisture, you can see it's wet because they do have a lot of water in them. But if we look closely, this is my pulp of the pumpkin, okay? Each pumpkin does have pulp. This one, because of the type of pumpkin, it has a lot more. And in this type of pumpkin, this is really one of the only pumpkins that you actually would use this. This is what we would use, not the shell. This, the pulp, is what we would use to make pumpkin pie. So once we've cleaned out this area, you could actually scrape this out and you can blend it up, and you can use this to help create pumpkin pie. So in a sugar pumpkin or a pie pumpkin, they have different names. This is what they use for the pie. Not this part, it's our pulp of it, and it's pretty thick. Other pumpkins, we don't use the pulp to make anything usually. So they actually are pretty thin, they don't have a big pulp, but since this type of pumpkin, that's what it's used for, it tends to have bigger pulp. I'm not sure why it has more, but this is the one that we use. A lot of other things that we get the pulp from is actually squash. We eat the pulp as well. So next to our pulp, you'll notice we have these things. Do you see the little lines? And it looks kind of weird because I'm sure when I cut it in half, it was not what you were expecting the inside of the pumpkin to look like. I'm sure what we were expecting was something similar to this more. So you see the seeds? So in here, and it's interesting when you do it this way because they actually do all line up usually. You can kind of see them in a line. These right here, these little tiny hair looking things, it's kind of like what they are like. They're very sticky. These are called fibrous strands. And what fibrous strands do is actually, they are what hold, if I can get one out, our pumpkin seeds in our pumpkin. So when our pumpkin is first growing, they do grow their own seeds. I'm trying to get one out for you guys so I can show you. These fibrous strands are very strong. And when they start growing, they have very tiny, itty bitty little seeds, just like this little guy. So compared to our other seed, you can see they're very different sizes. So the fibrous strand, this one even, because it's such a baby, it did not want to come off its fibrous strand. Its fibrous strand is what holds our tiny itty bitty seeds onto the pumpkin pulp. Because the outside shell, remember, is protecting, then all of our nutrients are coming in through our vine up here, and it goes straight in. You can see here's part of the pulp. It goes straight into the pulp, and the pulp is going to have all those nutrients, all that water, and then it connects to the fibrous strands like this, and then it helps our little seeds get bigger. Because the point of a plant is it wants to regrow and wants to reproduce and keep making more plants. So the fibrous strands take the water, take the nutrients, and they make these pumpkin seeds get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that way we can continue to grow other pumpkins. So you can see pumpkin seeds, and you'll notice that these pumpkin seeds are probably about the same size of pumpkin seeds from big pumpkins. It doesn't really matter what size pumpkin you have, the seeds are pretty similar. Another interesting thing about this is, again, we can see, here I took a whole chunk of it, here are all the fibrous strands with these pumpkin seeds that have not grown yet. So these did not get big yet. You can see they're very, very clear, almost see-through. And as the pumpkin, if it continued to grow on the vine, these would eventually develop and get bigger, just like these seeds. So we have, this side is full of seeds as well. This actually has a lot more. This goes very, very deep. All these fibrous strands though connect, and this pumpkin is just filled with seeds like a normal pumpkin. So this space in between, we have our pulp, and our pulp is very thick. Then we have our fibrous strands and our seeds. This part where the fibrous strands are and the seeds, you can tell it has the fibrous strands, but it's actually pretty spaced out, and there's a lot of room in here and a lot of air because the seeds, again, they start out very tiny and they grow bigger, so they do need space in there to grow. So the inside of our pumpkin looks like that. There's also another interesting thing. So putting our pumpkins aside. This side, you guys can tell, would be the same exact thing. So if I take my knife, our seed actually has a few different parts too. These are very slippery. So if I cut this, you can actually eat pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds, so you're not gonna wanna eat them like this right now. What you can do is rinse them off a little bit and then you bake them. And if you put them with some salt on it while you bake, oh, they're so delicious. So our pumpkin seed also has its outer seed coat or its shell. And then inside, you can see there's a little bit of a different color. And that is called the nut. So this outside shell, again, almost like our pumpkin shell, it's protecting this inside piece. This inside piece is what eventually grows to be a sprout and turns into a pumpkin plant. Doesn't look like one now, but it has the stuff inside. That stuff inside is what's going to sprout and become the plant. An interesting thing is as the plants grow and they sprout, your pumpkin shell, the seed shell, it opens up and the plant just sprouts out of it. Same with a sunflower seed if you've ever watched it. And it kind of holds onto the shell on the outside. And then once the sprout gets big enough, it pushes off that shell. And the shell is just done, and usually the soil will take the nutrients from it. So now we've seen all the different parts of the pumpkin, what they're used for, why it's important, and what each of the parts does, which is kind of neat because we don't really think about what is the purpose of each of these. So what we're going to do now is we're going to clean this up, and we're going to go ahead and work on our parts of a pumpkin for our lap book. So you're going to need your lap book, some crayons, some scissors, and a glue stick.